So I actually wanted to start by talking about what Roger Staubach once told you about what to do once you retire.
Well, it's funny. When I was growing up in the mean streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, on my wall was a poster of Roger Staubach, and he was going to throw. I go lefty, but he was righty, and he had his hand around the ball, so I could see it, and you could see his fingers on the ball. And so I remember looking at it and grabbing the ball and kind of putting my fingers exactly like him, and that was the beginning of what is a real hero to somebody, right? It's like you try to talk like them, you try to play like them, and so through the years we got to, know each other, which is amazing. You get to know your hero. That's pretty cool.
So when did he give you the advice, and what did he say?
So then I was retiring. I was towards the end, and I ran into him, and I said, look, you've done it better than anybody. And I had gone to law school. My dad, Grit Young, he means every bit of it too. It is gritty. That's who he is.
You guys would hang up the phone when somebody would call the house when you guys were kids and ask for his real name.
Yeah, LeGrand Young? I'm like, I don't know who that is. He hated LeGrand. He thought that was the craziest name in the world. What I could have been with that now. Like, he hated that name so much, Graham, that he's like, I hate that name. I just want normal names. He named his boys Steve, Mike, Tom, and Jim. And just to finish that story, my brother Jim had 5, 6 kids now, and the youngest is named Zuzu, just to stick it back to full circle. Like we're going off the rails, man. Sweet Zuzu. So it's just funny that that part of the story. But where was I? But Grit
You
Young,
were retiring.
and
Oh, yeah.
and he told me when I was growing up. I told him I want to be Roger. He goes, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be a quarterback in the NFL. And he said, hey, that's a dream. Dreams are less than 1% chance. But dreams are good. But it's just really rare that dreams come true. So I want you to hold that dream, but I also want you to have a plan. What's your plan? 80% chance. What's the plan? And I'd like, I'll go to college and then I'll go to law school like you. That'll be my plan. And he's like, good, dream and a plan. Always important, hold them both, take them with you your whole life. So then I go pro, and I call my dad. I was like, the dream is now it's 100% chance.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, what's the average career? 3 years? And I'm like, oh yeah, so what's your plan? Stay the same? Okay, this plan's the same. So about 5, 6 years into my career, I said, Dad, I think we're good. And he goes, yeah, but then let's say you play 15 years in the league and you're 35 years old. What do you do the rest of your life? And I was like, and that's when I went to law school, started law school the next year. And that ends with Roger Staubach and the advice. I'd gone to law school, tried to prepare for it, as my dad talked about, the plan rather than the dream. And it was always in my head. And so when I was getting close to it, I asked Roger, what's the advice? And he said, run. Just like that, run. I'm like, run? What do you mean run? Like, he said, you gotta run. You gotta run away. What you did on the field will never leave. You don't have to worry about it ever leaving you, but you need to run away, because otherwise you'll hang around and that's all you'll ever think about. And I thought that was great advice, and that's what I did. I took my law degree, finished the game, and just started running. And now you're in my office, so.
You remember the first time you met him?
Yeah. Oh, I just threw up in my mouth. Not because I met him, but because of the situation. So we're in 1992 championship game at Candlestick Park. We're playing the new upstart Cowboys, and I need to win this game, like in the worst way. And the Cowboys come out for the coin flip, and I walk out there, and out walks Roger Staubach to represent the Cowboys as an honorary captain. And I'm thinking to myself, I just described to you the impact he's had in my life. I've never met him. And if you can think about that moment for anybody, any of you that have a hero, somebody you look up to that you'd like, if you met him, you'd kind of want to faint for all the impact they've had in your life, that was me. And so there was Roger Staubach. I'm like, and then after we did the coin flip, I'm like, Mr. Staubach, Steve Young, I had my poster up and I was just babbling, and you've been a real hero of mine. And he turns to me and he goes, Steve, you got to go play. And I'm like, yeah, right, sorry, we'll talk later. But we ended up losing that game. And probably the most painful loss I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Yeah. I think there's no question that was particularly painful. And but yet there was my hero, and we should probably finish the story because after we met, we became really good friends through the years.
By the way, did you talk to him after that game?
Not after the game.
Okay,
no,
right.
I did not see him. But over the years,
Yep.
we got to know each other, and he was always loved the conversation, loved the interaction, loved being associated with me, and I really appreciate that. And so just to close the story out, we're in Canton. I'm going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the induction ceremony. Dan Marino and I are going into the 2005 vintage, and they have a Ray Nitschke luncheon where when all of the Hall of Famers are in the room and no one else can be in the room. No handlers, no secretary, nothing, no assistants, no nothing, just the Hall of Famers. And they're all sitting there waiting for you and then you walk in and it's like every face you see, it's like surreal. Every face you see is the most famous person in football history through the years, all the way back. And as much as you're used to it by now, you're like shocked.
Yeah.
And then I could see every seat was kind of full, and I wasn't sure where to go where do I sit? And then I look across the room, and there's Roger, stands up, he goes, and he has a spot next to him. And so I get goosebumps thinking about right now, just the impact, the hero stuff, what he's given to me, and then I asked him to finish your story.
By the way, what about recalling that makes you a little emotional?
I think more than it's just everything. Just you climb a mountain when people are throwing rocks at you the whole time, both on the field and off, right? And every time you make a step, it gets tested, and every time you take another step, I'm doing the metaphor, works in my mind at least, to get to the top of the mountain, and there's your hero that you really admired and loved the way he played and loved how the person he was, and then you're at that ultimate moment, sitting with all the Hall of Famers, going into this group of 300 guys, and there's that person that represents. Remember, I was 8 years old. All of that feels. It just feels very emotional. I think there's a connectivity to it. There's an appreciation, and there's just the raw feeling of the journey that I loved and hated, and that was when people say, what's that moment that kind of, that's that, when I remember him, you got your spot right here.
What did you find to be the most challenging part of successfully transitioning to business?
I think it's what I told you. When you develop expertise, I don't care what it's in, nuclear science, nuclear fission, robotics, or quarterback in the NFL, it's an expertise that is rare. Like, it's hard to get. And you want when you have an expertise, you want to use it the rest of your life. Like, I'm really great at something. Let me keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And then you get kicked out at a fairly young age, and the next day is when you realize that you've fallen off a cliff, and you're at the bottom of the cliff in a bag of bones. Like, it's a death. And
you felt that way?
It's a death. If you don't treat it, I try to tell everyone who's transitioning, and I mean this for any passion that somebody has for something. High school, my brothers loved football even more than I did, I think, and they didn't play past college, and so college was the death. High school can be the death of the dream, where you finish playing. I think you have to treat it like it and mourn it that way and recognize it. Otherwise, you never actually heal from it. I think when you're really good and great at something and you can't do it anymore, it's a death. And you have to, I would say you're a bag of bones at the bottom of the cliff, and you have to figure out a way to start crawling and then walking. And the truth of that moment is that you're not good at anything else, let alone great. You keep saying, no, I was great. Yeah, but what are you today? I don't know, what are you even good at? And I think that's the biggest challenge in the transition, is to recognize that, heal from the pain of losing your expertise in a way, never being able to replicate it. You never will be on the field again. You'll never take every ounce of your soul poured into to being good at something. You'll never, it's gone. Yet, can I transition to something that can be challenging and even sublime and better emotionally, better rewards in some ways, better life? Yes. And the way to do it is recognize that I'm not good at anything else. So the transition, to me, the key was the humility to say, I'm going to try to get into business, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I have to recognize that I'm not even good at it right now.
What do you think you learned from Mitt Romney?
So Mitt and his partner Bob Gay, you could say that they're the godfathers of private equity in some ways, right? They, late 80s, Bain Capital, maybe KKR with Henry and George are good friends. I love both of those guys. What I learned is that fundamentally, at its core, business is people. Business is, even negotiations, even all the transactions that are part of business. Don't let the transaction lead. In other words, if it's just a negotiation and you get something and I get something, don't let, that's at its base what it is, but build off it and find abundance in it.
That means what?
Find the ability to be curious about across the table. What are you looking for? Why? What makes it very important? What do you have to have? Would you like to have? And what does it not really matter that you don't want to fight over? How can we find this space to make a great agreement where no one gets everything, but we get what we have to have? And in that is abundance, where there's a spirit of it. There's a spirit of the negotiation where you shake hands and it lasts because it's been worked. And so much of life is zero-sum game. We make it, I win, you lose. And then what happens? The loser says, well, over my dead body, I'm coming back and we're going to fight again. And we're going to fight again. You can see it in politics, you can see it in global relations, like everything's zero-sum game. It's transactional life played out, and it always rots. And so I think that's what I learned, is to try to find, even in the transaction, the abundance in it.
How'd you go about learning the business?
I started a business with my friend Jim Herman, a couple guys from college, and Rich Lawson, who's now my partner for 25 years, in a business called Found.com. We were servicing retailers at the time who had brick and mortar stores who were worried about being Amazoned. We were 10 years before our time, and telling them you can query your inventory real time, and then someone could ship it that day down the street or come pick it up. And so anyway, we built a business off of it. It's the first kind of transition from law, which is what I thought I was going to do. I guess I should back up a little bit. I was on the board of Power Bar. I was playing.
Because you used to have 2 power bars and a banana before every game.
So Brian Maxwell started Power Bar, which in his garage in Berkeley, California. And it was a meal replacement for marathoners. Well, I'm single, I'm not cooking, so Power Bar became my meal replacement as well. And back then, the very early ones were hard. So you had to put them under your arm and kind of warm them up in the wrapper, not unwrap, but in the wrapper. Yeah. Try to get them warmed up so you could eat them.
Sounds like a great pregame meal.
But they were tasty, they were good. I give Brian amazing credit, he's passed away, but a good friend. And he got to know me through me famously having Power Bars and a banana, and so he invited me to be on the board. And I had done, been in law school, but I didn't really understand the business of boards. And so the first board meeting, I go to his board meeting, and in it was Larry Sonsini, the Titan lawyer of Silicon Valley, and Warren Hellman, the Titan investor in Silicon Valley in 1995. And they both saw what I was trying to do with this business that we were starting and said, Steve, you're built for business. You're built for the people. And so I transitioned. I wasn't going to be a lawyer anymore. I was going to be in business. And then it was Bob Gay, his partner Mitt Romney, who gave me the opportunity to kind of jump the shark in a way and not have gone to 3 years of consulting and not got an MBA, but got a JD and could get into private equity and help me form our first private equity shop in 2001 called Sorensen Capital. And that's how I transitioned.
And the Northgate Capital,
that was the precursor. You really want to do this.
Well, you kind of got, from what I understand, you kind of got bored. And,
I didn't get bored.
That kind of impacted
No, that's not true.
Trajectory.
So, I don't know how this, you guys when you fall asleep, let me know and we'll do something different. In the locker room, Silicon Valley's exploding around the 49ers. We're in Santa Clara. The land was given to Eddie DeBartolo in 1987 by the city of Santa Clara because nothing was going on down there. And the 49ers were going to, enliven the place. Yeah. Then within 6 or 7 years, Silicon Valley's exploding. And we're in the locker room. We're having lunch, a lunch group. Ronnie Lott, myself, Harris Barton, Brent Jones, Tommy Vardell, about 5 or 6, 7 of us. And we're watching the explosion around us, and like literally Cisco and 3Com, like businesses just, and we said when we heard about venture capital up and down Sand Hill Road, all the businesses, all the firms, Sequoia and NEA and Foundation and all of them, and it's like we should invite them in the locker room and make the association, and then tell them, hey, look, everything you do, give us $50,000 of it, and we'll split it up, and we'll start to make and that's what we did. And we started to make the associations with all the firms, and they gave us, they'd call us, and I can still remember.
Maybe not.
No, but I can. No, that's right. I can still remember the call from Doug Leone at Sequoia, and he would go through the things that Sequoia was doing back then, and he'd say, "Hey, look, this one looks good. This one looks good." And I remember on the phone when he said, "There's another search engine called Google. Don't worry about it." I remember it. I remember him because they invested in Google and they were made, but it was funny. It was a fun time. It's a crazy time, and super cool. But anyway, out of those relationships that we built, Ronnie and Harris retired first, and they started Champion Ventures using those relationships. And then a couple years later, Brent Jones, myself, Tommy Vardell, and Mark Harris left. We all retired and started what was Northgate Capital. So when Roger Staubach said run, I was running, man.
And you've now obviously spent more time in business than you did in the NFL, and obviously your company's super successful. But how have you gone about figuring out what the sweet spot is for the companies to target, and what you look for?
So our firm is HGCC. It's an amalgamation of our, when we started in 2008. And what we decided to do in 2008, and I've been in my own private equity less than 10 years. When I joined, I realized this is a hornet's nest of relationships. It's called private equity and partnerships. Every firm is a partnership. I'm like, this isn't a partnership. This is a hornet's nest. This is acrimony. This is a fight amongst each other. This is insane. Because I'd come from a place where, hey, look, we're all independent contractors. We're all trying to make a career of ourselves, but we subsume when it's time, we're together. And we're together like in blood. That's my previous life. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden in business, it was like, oh yeah, no. We fight, we don't ever come together, we don't ever really work it out. We just kind of keep, there's blood on the floor everywhere. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a part of it. That's so non-resonant to me. I'm not interested. And so we started a firm, which is now HGCC, where all we do is partnership investing. Across the table is future partner.
Well, that's like the seller's also the buyer.
Seller's the buyer, right? They both can. So in other words, we meet people. We create think about it. I have 3 doctor brothers. One's an ER doc, very transactional. Come in, get out, and one's a family practitioner. And so it's the family practice is what we're trying to do in private equity. Private equity naturally is the transaction, get in, get out. And I think we're the ones that are willing to spend the time in the relationship. What really matters to people. And we're the original partnership investor. Today, partnership investing is super cool in private equity. Everyone talks about it. But 2008, nobody talked about it.
And why do you think that was?
Because it was a science project. That's the reason why we're interested in doing this way, because it was a science project everywhere. Just spreadsheets and cuts, and people just get out. And private equity, again, the ultimate transactional business, private equity. Back to what you asked me in the original question, can you find the abundance in the transaction? And HGCC is built off trying to find the abundance in the rigor, the high-functioning, competitive market of private equity.
And I know you don't like talking about money, but you guys have, I think, funds totaling $10 billion, 2% management fee, 20% of profits. I mean, in terms of financial success, it's well exceeds.
Well, Graham, I go back
NFL.
Go back to
financial success for you.
I understand where you're going. Go back to Bill Walsh, because Bill wrote a book. Coach Bill Walsh of the Hall of Fame wrote a book called "The Score Takes Care of Itself," and the concept was, I will teach values and principles, and if we live by those values and principles and play by them, the score will take care of itself. I don't need to watch the scoreboard. And I think it's an incredibly powerful principle when he used to talk about how we need to be shared common experiences. He wanted to not just know the guy's name on the back of his jersey, he wanted you to know each other. The idea was that if you got into Lambeau Field down by 4 with a couple minutes left with no timeouts, 3rd and 10, and you're in the huddle, his fundamental principle and value was, do you have an element of love for each other? Have you developed it? Have you spent the time? Have you cross-fertilized? You get 50 guys together, the quarterbacks hang together, the defensive linemen, and he would push us to get to know each other, to really spend the time, to find that element of, again, abundance. That's where it comes from in my heart, is Bill Walsh and how he thought about players and coaches even. They were partners. And so you go back to capitalism and private equity, it can be a knife fight and blood on the floor and terrible relations and profit. And go, well, it's profit, it's good. I think capitalism is a great way to do abundance. And I think that it's complex and harder. It's aspirational because I suck at it still. If you think, oh yeah, I've got this, you'll get beat down. You have to push the rock up the hill every day in the effort, in the spirit of trying to find a resonant place in the transactions around you. And if you do that every day, you're thoughtful and meaningfully about it, then like Bill Walsh said, the score takes care of itself. And I think that's why you can draw me into talking about, the amazing success that the 49ers had, or the amazing success that HGCC has. And it's true, super successful. But based off the fundamental principle that it's seeking the relationship, it's seeking something that lasts. And so I think that's why the 49ers were great. And whether we're great or not at HGCC, I think we intend to be great in the same way.
What's Mark Zuckerberg like?
I've met him very often. At Halloween, he used to give out huge, giant, Nestle Crunch bars, or like the giant ones, not just the little ones, but the giant ones. You're like, bro, what do you make me look bad, man? Because Barb, she doesn't want to be giving out the giant. She wants to give out the natural candy and you don't quit trying to shame me. This is like neighbor shame. We can't do that. So that, but I don't know if it changed. But no, they don't even. It's the other famous technologists around Palo Alto now have opened their homes up that line up literally for 3 or 4 miles. But a number of times people have knocked on my door and say, hey, does Mark Zuckerberg live nearby? And I'm like, yeah, just keep going that way, In Palo Alto, if you played football, pretty much nobody knows.
Tell about Halloween at Steve Jobs.
Well, it's not at his house. He was a neighbor. Palo Alto's a weird town because there's no gated communities. It's like you just kind of, and he was 2 doors down. And this is 1998 or 99, late 90s, early 2000s. Next and Apple, he left Apple. It was like, he was not Steve Jobs that you know today. And I remember walking by his house, and he would have his office right near the sidewalk. And Palo Alto's a walking town. Like you walk around, it's like Mayberry, in a way. And I walk by, and there's Steve Jobs every night, just doing his thing. And so Halloween, I don't know what story you want, but
whichever one you want.
Well, there's a great one where he would, as Apple, he got back into Apple in 2005. People in Apple are gonna be mad at me. They don't remember this. And Tim Cook, my friend, but I don't know why I name dropped that, because he's my neighbor. I'm not trying to name drop, I'm just my neighbor. And so Steve would famously walk around the neighborhood, and you'd see him all the time, just talking, hands, and I was like, I got the feeling that that's when people got fired. You're like, hey, you got to go see Steve, and he's going to walk you around, and you're going to. But I don't know if that's actually true. But it's like, if anything happened good at Apple, it probably happened, around our neighborhood. So one day I'm jogging. I used to go on runs downtown and come back. I'm jogging back, and I see Steve, and I see someone else, and I don't know who it is, and suddenly the guy who I don't know says, "Steve Young," and I'm like, "Hey." And then Steve Jobs, my neighbor, who we've met like 8 or 9 times, goes, "Oh, hi." And he clearly didn't know. I was like, "Steve, I'm your neighbor. I've met you 5 or 6 times, but Steve Young, He's like, "Oh, yeah." And then, so it's just so funny that, and then I got talking, and the guy that I didn't know was like, "Steve, I know you, because we used to go over to Mormon basketball at the Stake Center, and we play basketball and pick up, and I'm like, "What? What are you doing?" And I finally realized, oh, that's Larry Ellison. Like, it took me a minute. No offense to Larry, but it just took me a minute to put it all together. And I just thought that was a funny interaction where nobody knew each other. We're all neighbors. And that's the insanity of Silicon Valley in 1995 and 98, right? And 2000. It was a crazy, crazy time. The whole world now spins off of what happens here in many ways in technology. It's now spread out throughout the world, of course. But at that time, those were the guys that, the Hewlett and the Packard in the garage, and what a place to be.
So we were talking about your dad a little bit. His YMCA regimen entails what?
So again, my dad's nickname is Grit. What a cool name. Wish I would have earned it. He had AFib for heart flutter, so that his heart was never on full beat, starting in 1970. And so when that happened, back then they didn't have an easy solution for it, which now today is like nothing. And so he had to live with it. And so he couldn't work out the way he wanted to, but he was a workout fiend. He loved working out. So he figured out I could do sit-ups. My heart could handle it, and I could really get a good workout, but it took a few hours. And so he, over the years, would go in at 4 a.m. He's a 4 a.m. kind of guy. And he'd start his sit-ups, and he had a mat and his whole thing. He'd come in, and over the years, people were there, and they'd watch this guy come in and start doing sit-ups, and then come back an hour later, and there he was doing sit-ups, and then an hour later, there he was. It got to be where he was like 8,000 sit-ups a morning. And you think to me, "Oh, Steve, you're exaggerating. Quit freaking lying." No, 5,174, 5,100. That's my dad. And so over the years, the people in the Y, he became famous for this insanity. And now if you walk into the Greenwich YMCA, Greenwich, Connecticut, there's a little plaque with my dad and with some trophy for 8,000 sit-ups in the morning, and that's how he did it.
You would describe his work ethic how?
As a kid, you never felt pushed. The only time you felt pushed is when you wanted to quit. Like, he didn't push you to do stuff. Like, hey, you got to play there, you got to do that, or you got to. But once you chose, okay, you know what? I'm gonna play baseball. Then, if you went to him and said, "Hey, you know what? I don't feel like practicing today," oh, he'd be inflamed. It's like, no, you chose to do this. Now live it. Be about it. And he would not have it. The idea of quitting or not giving the full measure of yourself. I remember when I went to BYU and I was the 8th string quarterback, and I called my dad. I'd been recruited by North Carolina. Maybe I could start there, and now I'm an 8th string quarterback. I'm, "Dad, this is terrible." And I was miserable, told him I wanted to come home. And he made this famous quote, you can quit, but you can't come home, because I don't live with quitters. And he was dead. He wasn't metaphorical. It was like dead serious, like, don't come home. And if he would have said to me, "You know what, Steve, you are getting screwed. It's not fair. You come home," I would have come home. And so I'm grateful for the grit in him.
Or baseball when your batting average was 0.
Yeah, so in our town, baseball was the king. Clam box was the team.
You were quite the player,
and
too.
I was 13 years
Eventually.
old, and I thought I was And all the kids were like, oh, he's a really good athlete. He's really going to be great. I went 0 for 40, I want to say. Like, it got to be like a running joke. It was pain. Can you imagine a 13-year-old and all the kids, and you're supposed to be this super cool athlete, and you can't get a hit? I finally drag bunted, so I got on base. But I remember that next year, my dad, I dragged him down to North Miami School in the winter, in the snow. Like, I look at it and you think I'm joking, but it's like, I remember snowflakes and he's throwing balls and I was just hitting them because it just wasn't going to happen again. So I've had some bad. See, Graham, you wanted to just go through all the bad things that happened in my life. So let's just get them out of the way. Yes, Urkel beat me in the 3-point NBA celebrity shootout. Okay, I get that. I lost Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in the first round because I didn't know what Crucible was. Like, let's just get them all out so that I can just get it done. We're all kind of finished and we can start talking about the good stuff.
I understand he had a distinct whistle.
Yeah. He had a whistle. You could hear it from all around the neighborhood, and that meant it's time.
And like, you guys would instantly drop whatever you were doing.
Yeah, my dad was somebody like, you didn't want to test it. You know what I mean? But it was funny.
There was a fear, though.
I think it was. I want to believe it wasn't fear; it was respect, but probably a little fear. But there was nothing outwardly to fear. Like, it never punched me or hit me or like threatened me. You know what I mean? But there was just like, hey, this is what we're doing. Let's be about it. You know. And so in that way, when the whistle came, all the kids came running from all over the neighborhood.
What's the Woodshed?
He threatened the Woodshed. I guess there was some fear. Good call. I don't know where you're getting all this, Graham. He would always say, I'll take you to the Woodshed. You keep it up, I'm taking you to the Woodshed. I was like, man, I never want to go to the Woodshed. I hope I never see it. And as I got older, I'm like, wait, we don't have a Woodshed. So he's just freaking making it up, you know?
Why is he your hero?
Well, I think parents have such a vital, I mean, obviously, from the very moment you're born, but parenting is that sacred place, right, where you get everything. You get your parents' DNA, whatever that is. You get their personalities, you get their flaws. You have to live with them in that way. And so parenting's like a dicey spot. And I'm just grateful for the consistency that my parents gave me. My mom is a peacemaker. She would go to the ends of the earth to make sure that people felt a sense of peace. And people might say, oh, she just, gave in a lot. No, she was like a peacemaking athlete.
I heard she could have a tough streak too, because when your brother didn't want to collect on his paper
route. Where are you
route.
getting these, Graham? This is insanity. Yeah, we did the paper route for years. I had it, and then I gave it to my brother Mike. And Mike, one day, it was time to do collection. We hated to collect because that's the day you have to knock on the door and collect the 45 cents and all that stuff, or the $3. And we hated that, and Mike wouldn't do it. I'm not doing it. And my mom punched him. We still laugh about that one. Anyway, so I guess that belies my peacemaker story. But my parents, the consistency and the ability to count on them, I think there's something about, for my childhood, what was, you take it for granted, but they were there. And the hero kind of part is like, I've always said there's nothing worse than a bad priest or a bad cop or specifically a bad parent, because they're such trusted individuals that when they go bad, it's like double bad. So I'm grateful. They lived it out. And they're almost 89 and 86. And I saw him the other day. As I was leaving, he goes, "Don't ever let the old man in." I'm like, okay, Dad. You heard that from Jerry Jones in his speech. Jerry Jones had made I think it was on his Hall of Fame speech. And ever since then, my dad is like, don't let the old man, like Jerry said, no, let the old man in. I'm like,
What do you think you most learned from your mom?
I think our home today is a peaceful home because I've modeled, and Barb and I modeled in some ways my mom and others in her life, I'm sure, but we have strife and conflict and trials are dealt with in trying to find a peaceful way to deal with them resonantly and authentically, and I think that's the pay it forward for my mom is I think, my home. And I noticed when we get together, all the young kids, we go down to Lake Powell every year on houseboats, and I have 70, my brothers and sisters, all of us have 27 kids, and they all come down, and it's remarkable. Everyone gets along. You'd think there'd always be someone have a conflict, and I think that's the spirit of my mom.
Jim said to me, Steve likes to have things feel like they aren't smooth because he likes to make it smooth, whether in personal or professional life.
That reminds me of my dad one day, middle of my career, something happened. He goes, you know what? I am convinced you like 3rd and 10. And I thought I was offended. I was like, 3rd and 10 sucks. Like, would you think I like it? He goes, I don't know, your life, it feels like you look for it. And it's bothered me ever since. Like,
really?
Is it possible? Is it possible, Graham, that I like 3rd and 10? Like, that would be sick, right? Like, anyone's like, I'm 3rd, oh no, I'd rather be 3rd and 4, right? Of course you would be, right?
Well, what do you think?
I don't know. I think 3rd and 10 finds me, and then I got to deal with it.
And why do you think it finds you?
Doesn't find I don't know. Maybe I'm no different than anybody else. I don't know. I think that, but it is interesting to think about my brother saying that I look for it, because my dad. That's what my dad said, and I just don't know what that means. I felt many times like I'm the end of a string on a stick, and God just spun it for fun. Like it would go fast, and then I was like, hey, this is too fast, and then like faster, and then faster. Like, wait, stop! But that's the life. I think, Graham, what happened is there was always a part of me that was a worrier, and there was always a part of me I wanted to go get stuff done. And luckily, the get stuff done part of me won. And in that part, I just kind of I'd see the next mountain, whatever it was, and I would just start climbing. And I think that's maybe what we're talking about.
Your GPA in high school was what?
It was a good GPA, Graham. I don't know where you're going with this. You finally brought something up positive.
Hey,
nice work. Trying to rehab me now. Tear me down, but like I'm a SEAL team. It was a good one. In fact, I never really missed a day of school, and I got A in honors classes. So I was all about school.
Right.
I was about, you could say I was an athlete nerd.
Well, because you had two groups of friends. You had the jocks, and then you had the honors students as your friends.
We had chess club, and they taught me how to do that, and yeah. I enjoyed the different conversations of the different groups.
But it was like a 4.0, right?
Let's be specific, Grant. I think it was higher than that because you get A's in honor classes, you get better credit. So, I mean, if you're going to say something nice, let's get it right.
Well, what was
I don't know.
Okay. How about in college, the GPA?
No, things slid a little bit in college. Anyone who said I was a 4.0 student in college, that would not be correct.
What did you?
I don't remember. I don't know, but it was. Okay. It was. I got through school very. Greenwich High School was great for college prep. Mm-hmm. Law school was tougher, by the way. Law school was tougher because we won 3 Super Bowls while I was going to law school. Right. Well, law school started January 5th, and the Super Bowl is February 4th.
But by the way, from what I understand, you didn't open your LSATs for a while, and you scored in like the 99 percentile.
So I know this for a fact because I lived it out with game plans. Every Friday, every Wednesday, I would write the game plan on the whiteboard at home in my writing, put it all in order. And then every Thursday we'd do, red zone, and then Friday we'd go goal line. We'd put it, and then Friday afternoon I'd have it all on a whiteboard, the whole game plan, motions, tendencies, blitz, everything. And then Friday and then Saturday morning, I would sit in the quarterback meeting room, and whoever was around me at the time, I would just close my eyes and see the board, and I would just read it, and I could do that. And so I know that there's a part of my brain that can do that. There was a, ability to, and that's why Mike Shanahan and I were such good friends, because I always call him Mike, let's go over it against Shanahan. So he was my coach, offensive coordinator when we went to Super Bowl. And so that's what I think, when you think about school, I can read things and then I can close my eyes and see them
So this is me trying to compliment you and you trying to
sneak out of it.
Explain why you're making an excuse for why you do well. What'd you major in college?
So it was at the time, it was called international relations or political science.
So like a double major and a minor,
finance, right? Yeah. And then I minored in French because I'd taken French in high school, and recently I took the kids to France and we got stuck somewhere and I had to go ask for directions, and they're like, "Dad, use your French, man. Let's go." And I went out there and I literally couldn't. I had more Spanish than I had French just being around the kids because they were Spanish immersion. Such a disappointment. Graham.
Could you
Such
say
a
anything?
disappointment. If someone spoke it, I could understand it, okay, but I could not speak a word. It was so sad. I'd spent some time trying to learn the language and let it all go.
Why do you think you pushed yourself so much even back then? Academically.
I was not a tiger child. I was not, or nor were my parents tiger parents. Like, we just played ball. And honestly, I was as good at over the line, which is kind of a bat and ball game we played in the backyard, than I was at football or baseball or basketball.
But academics too.
But academics. So I think, I don't know, I was interested. I think Greenwich High School was a great school, great teachers, people that challenged me. Terry Lowe was my honors calculus in my senior year. And he says, "I know that you think you're some famous football player. I know you think you can come in here and try to get away with it. It ain't gonna happen here." That was the first day. And then first test, C-. He's like, "I told you, I'm gonna run you out of here. I know you're not gonna make it." And and what did I had him come to Hawaii as teacher of the year for the NFL when in the middle of my career, because of how he challenged me in honors calculus to own it. And I did. And I earned an A from Terry Lowe, one of my greatest accomplishments. So much so that he said he convinced me to be a mathematician when I went to college. And freshman year I took some advanced, theoretical calculus class. I got blown out.
How does the seriousness in which you took academics impact your view of NIL today?
Well, I'm hoping, fundamentally, money is not evil. It can be really evil, but it doesn't have to be. It can be abundant. You have to fight for it. Fame, 90% of the time it steals accountability and steals from you, from your growth, but it doesn't have to. Power, again, one of these hit rates of about 100%. People get power and then things go to hell. It doesn't have to. You can find the abundance in it. So when you talk about kind of the challenge for intellectual, I found myself, I forgot the question. I got so into my own answer.
The seriousness in which you took academics, how does that impact your view of the NIL?
I guess what I'm saying is it shouldn't impact it. It doesn't have to. 90% chance it will. 98% chance it's going to impact very badly. So I think we know.
How so?
Because you put money in the hands of a 16 or 17-year-old kid when it could be generational wealth for the first time in the family, or not. No matter what the situation is, it's going to change the dynamic in the home. It's going to change the dynamic with your friends. It's going to change the dynamic of how you feel about success, or how hard it can be, or how difficult your life can be in the future, and can hide, in some ways, damn you from the progress and the achievement and facing the challenges that are coming. And that's what's scary. But that doesn't mean it has to. It's just that at that young age, throwing money at 16 or 17-year-olds it's tough when you're 22, 23. It's brutal. And you know the stories. You know the people that have wrecked by it. So yeah, there's tremendous chance that NIL money, now we go a generation away and we look back and we're like, man, that did not go well. I don't know how much time you have, but the NCAA did not answer the call to recognize the athletes' need to be compensated in some way. Kept fighting, pushing, being dogmatic, being fundamental about a problem. And it got so fundamental that the courts had to then say, look, you're not even doing what needs to be done here, and we'll do it. Once the courts do it, now you're in a Wild West insanity that only Congress can fix. No one else can fix it, or the courts themselves can amend. So we're in a mess for a long time, and it's too bad, because having college players compensated in a really, what I would think of as an abundant way, is really possible, but it's too late now.
If you were the one making the decisions, what changes would you make?
You can have free school for life at our college. You can have insurance for till you're 50 years old, because your body's going through a beating. We're going to have insurance, so you'll never have to worry about it. Like, those are it's real money, real things, but doesn't necessarily. And then make sure that they make money. Now, making $250,000 or $1 million a year or $4 million a year, I think it's just, I'd figure out ways to make sure that they were like anybody. You'd find a hybrid where you're getting paid, you're not running around broke. And then make sure that they had the financial fluency to know what to do. At least have a chance at what to do with it. They're in school. You've got a business school, most of them. Like, make the partnership. Figure out from day one, let us help you manage this money that's coming in.
The Express, it's the early 80s. You sign a $40 million deal. Between the guaranteed money and the annuity, it was supposed to pay out till you were what age?
I think 60. And so, and they added up all the annuity payments for all those years and then called it $40 million. At the time, Wayne Gretzky was making $2 million and Magic Johnson was making $2 million. And then I was making $40 million. That's how it was promoted. And it was worldwide. Japan News, Europe. I was a $40 million man. And I'm like, it's money that you get over 60 years, or 40, 50 years. And so, but I had to, every town I went into to play in the USFL, there was a sign, 40 million, you suck, you're terrible. And it's a great story. My mom, they drove down from Connecticut to Washington, D.C. to see the USFL game. And I did something on the field, fumbled or something, and a chant started in the corner of the stadium where she was, 40 million down the drain. And the chant started to take the whole stadium, 40 million down the drain. And my dad tells the story, my mom's like, she stands up and everyone around her, the guys and everything, and she goes, but it's an annuity. It's not 40 million, it's just an annuity. That's why he sucks. It's not, no, she didn't say that part, but it's just so funny that my life, again, how fast can we spin Steve Young? Let's say it's $40 million and have him try to answer for that in a world where I didn't really want to answer for $1.
Take me into the room where it's you and your agent, Lee Steinberg, actually negotiating that deal with a
Bill
quite
Oldenburg
colorful
was the owner. Yeah. So Bill Oldenburg was a real estate developer. He takes me down to the Transamerica building where Lee and I were going to negotiate the final parts of the contract. Thought it was done. And so we go upstairs and we're getting done, and my dad is, he's a lawyer, so he wants to be part of it. And he says, hey, I haven't read it. And Lee says, look, I don't know if we have time to read it. He's got a birthday party and there's a big hoopla here. And he's like, look, I'm having my son sign unless I read it. So then Lee has to tell him, like, Mr. Oldenburg, we're going to have a little delay here. We have to. So the delay goes on an hour and a half, and we're sitting in the conference room, just sitting there. And Bill Oldenburg comes in and he was pissed. And he's like, he takes a wad of hundreds, like as big as you can hold. And he goes, you want more money? Is that what this is all about? You want more money? And throws it at me, hits me in the chest with the money, like flying money. And I remember thinking, I've never seen so much money in my life, and I'm like trying to pick it up. And he storms out and has us escorted out of the building by security without the contract being done, because my dad wanted to make sure that he read it. And yeah, that was the richest I ever was, right there.
Didn't he try and throw a chair out of the window?
Oh yeah, he was trying to break. Yeah, he took a chair, was breaking the window, and he says, he was inflamed.
You almost took a swing at him.
Oh, that's right. So I'm Mr. Oldenburg. You got to calm down. And he tries to. You want to calm down? And he tries to. I'm like, hey, you need to, because he wasn't the biggest. He's not a large man. And I said, you need to calm down, because if this is not going to go well. That's how bad it got.
Tell about the call you got from Donald Trump.
I don't know what that story is, because I don't remember. I just remember when we were in the USFL, we had developed a league that was going to be a great spring league that's going to be on for a long time. Reggie White had played in there, Herschel Walker. It was better football than I played in Tampa Bay. It was like good football. I played with Gary Zimmerman, who's a future Pro Football Hall of Famer. We were, John Hadel was my coach, Sid Gilman. It was good stuff. But it was stretched financially, and we were in a tough spot. And when Donald Trump owned the Generals, he decided that he wanted to go to the fall to go against because the USFL was coming, and he was like, I want to go up against the NFL, and that's when it all collapsed. Yeah.
And like he tried to recruit you, or tried to get you to go
Graham,
to the
I don't.
USFL?
That story someone else have to tell,
Okay.
because I'm not sure that I know that one.
Okay, got it. Whether with the Express or the early in your 49ers days, you had an interesting way of handling your checks.
Well, I think it's PTSD from the $40 million thing.
So tell about the call you got from the then 49ers owner. It's nearing the end of the year, and he's trying to close out his books.
This is, again, a larger story. I'm in Tampa Bay. I'm was the number 1 draft pick in the supplemental draft for the Bucks, and we go 2-14. We're the number 1 draft choice, and the new coach, Ray Perkins, tells me I don't like lefties. I don't like scramblers. Look, I was an oddity back then. Today's game, I would be really cool, but back then I was odd. And I'd made a relationship with Hugh Culverhouse, the owner, and they traded me to the St. Louis Cardinals. And he called, and Ray Perkins says, hey, you've been traded. I'm like, oh no, that's the other team that's went 2-14. It's terrible. I called the owner and said, Mr. Culverhouse, we had a relationship. You said I was your quarterback for life, and now I'm getting traded. He goes, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, you're right. I'll nix that trade, and you have a week to go figure out what you want to do. And Bill Walsh was the first call. And Bill said 2 things that just shocked me that I'd never heard my whole life. I love lefties, which I'd never heard before, and I love people that can run around, because I think there's a great benefit to it. And then he told me that Joe Montana had 2 back surgeries, and I don't know when he's going to play again. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but maybe it's an opportunity, and so that's why I came. And again, I forgot your original question.
Oh, I said the call you got from the then 49ers
owner
when he was trying to close out his books for you.
I go too far back and I can't track you all the way there. So I come to the 49ers, and have the sense that maybe I'm going to play. And the first practice, Joe Montana runs out, and he looks great. And I turn to Bill Walsh and I go, he's not hurt. And Bill's like, sorry about that. So that started a 6-year odyssey for both of us, for the 3 of us. That, was, pretty dramatic. And I think part of that drama was when I wasn't playing, the one thing I didn't want to do was sit around. I'd rather go to law school than sit and watch. Backup quarterback was like, I spit it out of I just didn't, she said, oh, you're the backup quarterback. I didn't, I was just, anyway, that's how I handled it, and didn't handle it well. And I think part of the frustration was, you know what, this is the immaturity and stupidity of me. I was like, I'm not going to cash my checks. You know what, I'm just going to let them sit in the drawer, because I'm not playing, so it doesn't matter. And I was renting a little room from Harris Barton, my teammate. And I went back to law school in the off season, and Carmen Policy called me and said, general manager of the team, and said, hey, look, you're screwing up the taxes. Where's the checks, man? We got to file, it's April, we got to file. And I forgot I'd left them in the drawer in Harris's house, so I called Harris. I go, Harris, would you go into my room and just see if they're all in there? And Harris, he tells a funny story. He goes in there and he's like, 16 checks, pretty big checks. He's like, what are you doing, man? And I go, do me a favor.
You remember for how much?
I was, it was good money, man.
$4 million you just had sitting in your dresser drawer.
So I said, do me a favor, man. Would you gather them and send them to me? Because I gotta, back then there was no, you couldn't take a picture of it or anything. And so he sent them to me, we got them. I finally gave in because of the audit for the 49ers. Reluctantly gave in, Graham, reluctantly.
A friend once asked you, I guess, if you ever enjoyed life, and you replied, do I ever enjoy anything? You talk about like anxiety.
Yeah.
Describe how that would come out in you.
As a kid, I would, I was 3 sports, I was the captain, I was straight A's, I was doing all this fun, cool stuff. I was loving it. I didn't feel pressured. I didn't feel like my parents were over my back or anything. I was just flourishing. But I never wanted to go on trips. They'd go, hey, we're going to skiing in Vermont. I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. And I never really thought much about it until my parents would try to go away from town when I was a kid. And then I'd freak out and try to convince my other brothers and sisters that our babysitter's an axe murderer.
And you did once.
I did. And my parents had to turn around from going to a nice weekend together to get away to Philadelphia. And, but I didn't think much of it. It's like, yeah, that's just weird. Steve's weird. He does, I didn't know what to think about it. Then I wanted to go to college. And when I finally decided to go to BYU on scholarship, I remember going to school, actually leaving the house and going on the plane. I dreaded it in a way that was like, I didn't know how to describe it to anybody. I didn't want to show it, but I was freaking out. And I barely made it through my first semester of college. Other kids, my brothers and sisters, yeah, let's go to school, it's sweet. Not me, I was like, hey. And that is what is separation anxiety. Kids have it. And that's what I had. It was genetic, because my mom's side of the family, but I did not know it until I was 33 years old under real duress when I was playing for the 49ers. It's another interesting but long story. But
Jim, your buddy, said about you at the time that you wouldn't do much, stayed in your dorm room, walked around with your head down, wouldn't engage socially, and seemed sad and sullen.
That first semester, I dreamed of going home. I didn't unpack my bags. That was the truth. Those guys became my best friends, and I'm grateful for them to walk it through with me, because they didn't know what is that? Why is it so hard? Why, my dad, just have fun. And the transition, the change, that's why it's called separation anxiety, to separate from home. And then once I went back for home for Christmas that first year, I realized when I got home, I couldn't wait to get home. I got home and like, oh, I have another home. My brain somehow kind of transitioned. I was like, and so then it was fine. Going to college was great. And that helped me make other transitions in my life. But childhood separation anxiety, in your genes, you're born with it, it influenced my life in a lot of ways that I didn't even realize.
And your mom, I think, was called the class mom for...
Yeah, in second grade, because I wouldn't go to school. Because I think the anxiety of something new, as a kid at 6, 7 years old, your body just says, don't do that, don't go. And so my mom would walk me to school, and then she would stick around for a little while I kind of got settled. And then I remember the teacher making me, we'll make you the president of the class. And that was like, somehow there's this other part of me that liked the achievement. Right? I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. But it's like, I think that's why I'm really big on mental health, because I want people to be able to ask questions, to be able to say, look, I have an insecurity. If you think you don't have insecurities, you're not human. And be able to be open and be vulnerable enough to say, I've been carrying and dragging this insecurity around I didn't even understand it. And if you don't realize how good life can be if we deal with it, if we can kind of name it. That was what was great when I was 33 years old, when the child psychologist, I ran up there because Jim Clint, the team doctor, finally said, look, bro, I think you got something going on from your childhood. And I ran up there and he's like, you have undiagnosed childhood separation anxiety. A lot of kids had it. It's in your genes. Naming it, then I could be like, oh, that's why, on Saturdays before the games, I don't want to watch football. I want to watch, some movie, because I don't want to be reminded. The anxiety level for me was always higher. And I was like, why? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, because it's in your genes. And that helped.
You said it influenced, a moment ago, you said it influenced your life in a lot of ways. How do you think now?
I would say this. I think that in many ways, when you have anxiety around change or challenge, you're hypersensitive, you're hyper-focused. And the hyper-focus is a positive. It can be a positive. And I think I used it to be, I think quarterbacking in the NFL it's like going to law school. It's a memorization game. It's a data management game. The greatest players that I've ever seen, were data managers. They could take in the game plan and all the pieces of data that go with it and could reflectively give it out on the field. Like it just came out of them. And that's how you dominate defenses. You dominate them with data, essentially. I own it, and I know exactly what you're going to do, and now I know what to do. And the greatest quarterbacks today, the greatest quarterbacks in the last 20 years, or the greatest quarterbacks in the last 40 years, all were those guys. And so in that way, that part of me, that kind of, being able to look at a board of game plan and memorize it and then put it back in my head and close my eyes, that part of it really served me well on the field.
In what ways will the anxiety come out in you today, and how have you learned to manage it?
I remember they tried to do, when I finally found out 30 years ago, well, there's medicine that can help. I'm like, I tried, that makes me like I live under a blanket. Like I don't want to do that.
You tried it for like a day or something,
right?
But
the truth is, what was great about it was to talk about it, to know it, to point it out and say, that's a part of you that you didn't choose to take on. It's a part of your genes, and just like, and then dealing with it was like really powerful to be able to say it.
Well, and interestingly, you were talking about mental health before that was even really part of the conversation.
Right. During the day when I was growing up, I was the king. And then at night, I'm like, I gotta run home, like I wrote a little children's book right when we won the Super Bowl. And it was kind of a lot of the stories of my growing up and paper routes and bikes and stuff and they go, what do you want to title it? And I go, I want to title it, At Least I'm Not as Weird as Steve Young. Because I think that's super powerful to be able to tell everybody, at least I'm not as weird. Because I think there's something as you're growing up, to feel like I can be vulnerable and it's okay, because like people are weird and that's cool. And how do we work it out? And so again, I retired mostly because I was worn out emotionally. Had been 18 years and I was just worn out. And I think that even more than physically. And in that way, the day I retired, I remember Brent Jones, my long-term roommate, my best friend, he goes, because he'd retired a couple years before, he goes, you're gonna love it. It's amazing. And it was amazing to leave it behind. And it felt like what I left behind was this sense of anxiety. And I couldn't get my heart rate above 30, like ever since. I think it got burned out somehow. But it was funny, if you just said that, because every time my wife says, we should move, there is a little feeling like, oh no, I like home. I think there's still in your genes a little bit of that.
You mentioned Joe Montana a bit ago. You had wrote in your book, which was fantastic, the pressure to replace Montana was unbearable. The weight of the expectations was crushing me. My anxiety was overwhelming me. You told your brother in one conversation you didn't think you were going to actually make it till Thanksgiving.
Christmas.
Yeah, right.
And
what did you mean by that?
You got to give me a minute here. Replacing Joe, trying to be Joe, what I realized very quickly is that if you're a fan of the 49ers, when Joe's not on the field, their only memory is Joe never threw an incompletion, never threw an interception, and never lost a game. And here comes this guy, which all he does is throw incompletions, throw interceptions, and lose games. So it's like this, it's all overwrought anyway. It's insanity. And I'm in the middle of the season. The Gulf War had broken out in the Middle East in October of 1991. And the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, it was, the Gulf War, it's Steve Young's fault. Because it was funny, right? It's funny. But for me, living this out, I felt like I was in the bottom of a hole in depression and victimization. Like invested in success here, and it feels like other people aren't, and everything's my fault. And I got to and that's when I took off my brother was in the medical school at the University of Utah. I said, let me go see my brother, walk around town. And he goes, Steve, I got 3 kids and no money, man. I know it's hard for you, but it's hard for me too. And I was like, look, you're not helping me. And on my way home, that's when I ran into the great Steve Covey, who said, I told him all the terrible things that were happening in my life. And he said, Steve, let me ask you a couple questions. Eddie DeBartolo, and I told him how great he was. Bill Walsh, I told him how great he was. And Joe Montana's on the team. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. He goes, but if you had to ask him questions for mentorship. Could you do it? I'm like, yeah, I could. He goes, Steve, I travel the world looking for platforms for human beings to have the ability to iterate and get better and find out how good they can get. And I can tell you, in traveling the world, I've never seen a better one, the one that you have. And I realized then, at that moment, literally at that moment, it became crystal clear to me that the hole that I was in the bottom of, I dug. The victimization that I felt was self-inflicted. And I had just lacked the perception and the perspective to see the opportunity. And I raced from that plane flight home and never looked back.
Serious question though. Did you ever consider taking your own life?
Oh,
at
no,
that point?
of course, no.
Okay.
I was never, I loved achieving. When we talk about depression, I'm talking about like, I would much rather, just miserable. You're miserable. And I totally understand that there's when we talk about mental health, we can't shame anything. And I want to make sure that I don't either. Like, feelings are feelings and people need to deal with them and be constructive and not be shameful about it. But for me, it was always a weight that I felt. And I think the weight at times got so heavy, and then I'm so grateful for Steve Covey, for this man I met on the plane, to be able to shift my axis and stop the madness and be able to say, look, you are the luckiest bastard that ever lived. Go be and I said, then he asked me the last question, he goes, it's scary, do you want to find out how good you can be? Because some people, you might not be as good as you thought. You got to be able to take the risk. And I said, no, I'm telling you, I want to find out. And then he had the great comment on the last thing he said, he goes, then be about it. And then I thought, I've taken that my whole life, be about it. And that's been great, because life is hard. And finding ways through it rather than around it is super cool.
You remember the dinner with Montana at his house and what his 3-year-old says?
Is this the guy we hate? And like, no, there's somebody else. There was, I will say this about Joe. Joe's a good dude. And he is, the reason why Bill put us together, Coach Walsh, because he knew we both weren't toxic personalities. We got along. We played golf. We laughed. We did a lot of things together, but it was always awkward. Yeah. There's a great commercial AT&T did a few years ago called Awkward, where Joe and I come to Bo Jackson's house, and he comes in unannounced, we have this weird interaction. And that's really, it's been awkward. It's always been awkward. And I think it'll always be awkward, because we both wanted to be super successful, and there's only one job, and yet we never argued. I never had a cross word with him. We never had it out, because there's nothing to have out. It's just awkward.
Joe had the best 2 years of his career, back-to-back MVPs, and at that point, you've been in the league and his backup for how long?
2 years. That was both those years.
So
I was like, Bill, he's not only not hurt, he's never been better.
So at one point, both your dad, which says a lot, and your agent Lee say, time to move on. What was it that made you go against your most trusted advisors and stick it out?
It was a tight one. I've always had what I believed was kind of a conversation with heaven going on in my life. And that conversation felt bilateral, and I think
Meaning what?
Meaning that I felt like I'd get answers from, I would, in the conversation that I would have ongoing in my life, I would get I'd feel like a sense of, direction or peace or something. And I just, for whatever reason, I wanted out. I was the one that had Lee Steinberg go figure out how to get me out of here. I got to get out of here. I can't take it. It's crazy. I don't want to just watch. It's just nuts. My career just going by, and I'm just standing here. And then when it got really right down to it, we had to make the decision. I believe it was the Raiders.
Al Davis had guaranteed you'd be the starter from day one.
And it was the spring of 1991, and something about I just felt like, no, I've invested here. There's something about I want to stay, and that's when it turned for me too. So I don't know what to tell you, Graham. People say you're inspired. I don't want to minimize it by using things that people don't. I want people to appreciate that there's a ongoing conversation, and it can be, kind of important ways to live your life that I've found, and that was one of them right there.
You ever wonder how life would have been different had you?
Oh yeah, if life would have been different if I played in Tampa the whole life, or if I would have not gone to the USFL and been drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals with the first draft pick, or been to the Raiders in 1990, or But I got to tell you, my life is so uniquely guided in many ways by my experiences through working through and being around Bill Walsh and his abundant spirit, and Joe and his excellence and like amazement, and then my opportunity that like sharpened my saw so that I could, like, look, the 49ers and the West Coast offense had a tactical advantage until Mike Holmgren left in 1992 to the Packers, and then he took it, and they came back and attacked us. But it was a place for quarterbacks. It was a place, I'd been in Tampa. I'd seen the other side. And so there's a part of me that's like, look, this place is a place for quarterbacks. It's a place to find, to Steve Covey, if you're gonna ever find out how good you can get, this is the place to find out. And it was really true. And so unfortunately I had to wait 4 years to do it, but I'm grateful I hated those 4 years and loved them at the same time.
If you could, name all the injuries that you can remember having over the years.
Well, good thing, Graham, is that I never had surgeries. I never, even with the concussions, I was never knocked out where I was always tired and I wake up the next day better. I never had, I was banged around a lot. My dad always said, he said, you have thick bones, you're built for a beating,
Can you name them though, head to toe?
Well,
what
no,
comes to
I mean,
mind?
you're always good. Every week you're banged around. I mean, you're just banged around, and that's why that's one of the things I most admire about Joe Montana is like he put himself back together and was like, there's no way he's gonna play. Mm-hmm. And he would warrior up and go do it. And so for me, getting back to playing and having the bumps and bruises of this season, there are a litany of things we can go through at every body part. But the good news for me is that I never had a debilitating injury that cost me any joints. So today I'm here talking to you, and I run and I can do anything I want. And I have total mobility, and I'm just so grateful because I spent the first 35 years of my life trying to not be mobile and drive my body into submission. And then now, 30 years later, it feels like it might make it. So it's cool.
How many concussions?
Well, I would say when you felt dizzy, I mean, high single digits, where it doesn't feel good. The good news for me, I think, as far as I'm concerned, is I run into people all the time because I'm known for them now. And people will say, Steve, my son was playing basketball, he went up and it fell over someone and hit his head on the hardwood floor. He's been not in school for 6 months. He can't, dark light hurts his eyes. He sleeps all the time. And I'm like, 6 months? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I would feel dizzy, I would go to sleep and wake up the next day, feel better. Like so I don't know what to say, Graham. I don't know for sure exactly what it all means.
Now, do you think it's only a matter of time before you start to feel?
I don't know. I mean, I feel
What's your gut tell you?
My gut tells me that I had episodic events that weren't too terrible and that healed, and I cross my fingers. I think that's what it is. I did not, fortunately for me, I didn't have to be the guy that's in training camp, in every game, just pounding their head. The CTE stuff, is really scary. It's really, all of us we all assumed the risk to play football. And we thought we understood what it was. This part of it, and the brain and the CTE is something we've never understood. And it's scary for anyone who has ever played the game for a long time.
But how do you view CTE?
It feels like the brain doesn't like to be jostled around consistently, and there's a cost to it. It seems like it. And it seems like it's also genetic. Some people seem to be more susceptible to others. And look, as you get older and you think about Alzheimer's and dementia and that there's a segment of society that's going to have this anyway, and that does football make it more likely? I pray that it hasn't, but I got to live it out. And so does everyone else who's played football their whole life.
So there are physical injuries, there are mental injuries, and then there are situations where there's both. And I wanted to ask you, if I could, and I'll tread lightly, about one of
you mean
probably
this is the easy questions?
No. About one of the probably toughest moments of your life that tested, I'm sure, your resolve, because, everybody has something at some point in their life, and I'm sure people can learn from your experience how you avoid just letting something break you. You were driving from BYU back home. It was the younger sister of a woman that you dated. You were supposed to fly. The parents call you and ask if you could do them a favor. And if you don't mind, share what you're willing from there.
So I drove the first 12 hours through the night, and then it was morning and the sun was up, and Jill was 3 or 4 years younger than me, and I was kind of her older brother in a way, right? The family, we were very, very close. And the mom had asked me to drive home with her. The car that they had in Utah needed to come back to New York, Scarsdale, New York. And she was going to drive alone, and her mom called me and said, I know you're going to fly, but do you mind driving? I was like, no, it's fine. So the morning came, Jill slept the night, and then I fell dead asleep kind of as Jill started to drive. And the next thing I know, we were in the median just outside of, what was the town? I can't believe I forgot it. Just in the middle of Nebraska. And the big wide I-80 was really split by a big median, maybe 50 yards wide, 25 yards wide. And now we were down in the middle of it, and I wake up and we're down in the middle of it, and we're starting to, and it was a front wheel drive car, it started to flip. And all I know is we flipped a few times, and we ended up on our wheels, and I was okay. And I looked over, and Jill was slumped over the door, and immediately started to try to figure out how to, I'm not an expert, but how to try to do what I could in the middle of nowhere. So we don't need to go too far into it all, but Jill had passed away. We believed she had an aneurysm, and she actually had passed away before the car even hit the median. But at the time, she had passed away, and I'm alive, and I'm in the middle of Nebraska, and I promised her mom that I would drive her home. And I remember being really broken about it, about letting her down and letting Jill down, and the guilt of it was super heavy. And I remember getting back and going to Jill's parents' home in Scarsdale. First thing I get on the plane, go see them, and I'm thinking to myself, I was just kind of middle of nothing. I don't even know how to describe it. And I walk in, and her mother, Bonnie, takes me by the face and says to me, "Oh, Steve, I'm so glad you were there." And I was like, what? I'm just so glad you were there. You're the one person I'd want to have been there. And it was shocking to me. I was like, that's what you said? It was such a moment of grace in the pain that she must feel. To say something that would make me feel like I can get through this. I felt like my life was gonna, I don't know what to think about it. And I think that I wrote a crazy book called The Law of Love. And it's really based on those experiences where people choose in very, very tough circumstances to figure out a way to be selfless. And her mom being selfless at the moment and seeing me in my pain, despite hers, as a kid, I'll never forget. And I pay it forward to her the rest of my life. So, and I feel like, I don't know, Graham, I don't talk about that very much. I don't know why. You have a way of doing this. That's why you do it, I guess, for a living. But yeah, that's that.
What did getting through that for you entail?
I think a big portion of the healing happened right there. There was a spirit about how Ted and Bonnie, the mom and dad, how they saw it, and how they, this goes to your base theology that we have durable spirits inside of our bodies. And those durable spirits aren't from here. They're from a perpetual place. A lot of people call it heaven. And with that kind of belief that, you're here, Steve, and we want you to live it out for Jill. Go be it. Again, I used about Stephen Covey's "go be about it." It was a healing. It was that there's a healing that came out of it, and a strength in a weird way. And instead of wallowing in what I thought was going to be the guilt that I would feel for the rest of my life, I think was healed a little bit by their parents.
And it taught you what?
Well, of course, life is precious, right? Life is like every day. Everyone says, hey, live every day like it's your last. And I think for me, I think there's been I honestly have felt like an angel on my shoulder through my life. When Jill was an athlete, she loved football. And she loved talking about football. And so when I'd be playing, there were many times I'd hear her, it's like you carry people with you. And, I don't want to get too nutty, but I do believe in angels. I do believe there's durable spirits that can be near us and can help, almost can be assigned to us. And so I feel like that's always been a big piece of the puzzle as well.
I want to talk to you about faith, the role that faith plays in your life.
It's funny. My theology is that we have durable spirits inside of us. And my theology says that every human is of divine origin. Every human has divinity in them, in that durable spirit.
And that means what?
Meaning that I feel like we're family. And I think no matter what the strifes that you can have in life, if we have that base understanding that every human is divine and has the same divinity and has the same amount of love from heaven. God loves every human the same, and it's not going to change. And I think that informs my relationships. It informs kind of how I see the world. My base theology is that those durable spirits chose to take a body, like take a risk. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm willing to go learn and grow. I'm willing to take it on. I'm willing to give it a shot. And so I feel that theology for me is every human being is born in faith. Like, I don't know exactly how it's going to go, but I'm willing to take a crack at it. And I think that's since I was a kid, that's been in me, and I think that's how it's informed my whatever it is. And I think when Bill Walsh talks about abundance, that's already, it feels like it resonates with what I just told you. Like, I feel abundance in relationships. I feel like we can find that, we can do that. And so all of those lessons that I've learned from Roger Staubach or Bonnie Simmons, or like throughout my life, the angels in my life that are, in physical form, like people that have just guided me throughout, have all been part of that, fundamental truth. And so and I think that theology for me makes me curious about people, makes me interested, and also makes me want to make sure that they have space to journey. That if we're here to learn and grow, we all kind of came in faith. Why am I going to tell you how you should journey? You know what I mean? But is there a little healing spirit that I can give you on the way? Is there something positive that I can say that could, you know, as you bounce around, we're all bouncing around. You know, I mean, I don't want to get, but as we talk about base theology, body, agency, choice, opposition, everywhere. Like it's a laboratory for learning and growing. And so for me, you know, let's be about it. It's everything can be a learning experience. Everything can be alchemized. That's kind of the Christian fundamental belief, is that Christ can alchemize any human experience into a positive to learn and grow. And so I think my theology would never want to separate, would never want to not be a healing force, to be a place of judgment. I think religion needs to be healing in every direction to be worth it. And it's been, I have friends, I mean, the two Jewish guys in the NFL, John Frank and Harris Barton, were my roommates, you know. Brent Jones, an evangelical Christian, was my best friend. Like I grew up in a very cosmopolitan place. I have deep associations and close associations with agnostics and atheists, and like I am curious about people.
Well, by the way, so you moved to, as you call it, the mean streets of Greenwich. The summer going into fourth grade, you moved from Utah, and it's not like, you know, everybody looks at Greenwich now and the fabulous wealth. You guys weren't coming in as,
it was a suburb.
You know, rich high rollers. But there were only 2 Mormon families there at the time. So what was that like for you guys, especially given where you were coming from?
I loved it. My dad loved it. He misses it. They moved back from Connecticut to the West because all their kids had too many grandkids, and mom said, forget it. He misses the personalities and the characters that were hanging around Greenwich, Connecticut, down in the Cos Cob, you know, barbershop. Like he loved the deli, he loved hanging out and just chatting. So those were my friends. Those were the families that I grew up with. It was a cosmopolitan city, and we loved it. It was a great place to grow up.
And you would, correct me if I'm wrong, adhered to the no drinking, no smoking.
Right.
So
my religion was an oddity to people.
But that's also, you know, I know there's some sensitivity there on your end, but I think it's part of the fabric of who you are too.
Yeah,
and,
no, I agree with that. But I never want to be a burden on, like, in other words, I think the way to handle differences or just things that are different among people is comedy, you know, and laugh about it. You know,
but curiosity too.
Yeah, curiosity too, but laugh about, like, Steve, you know, and I think I very much as a kid grew up honoring, again, my base theology is you're divine and we're in your faith, like we're in it together here. And so, you know, and so quick experience, we win this county, I don't know, we had a big game and there was a big party my senior year, and I was now the Mormon kid that didn't drink and goody two shoes, you can be cynical about it, you know. And the kids from the other team came, and I was kind of surrounded, and they were like, let's take him down, we'll get this kid to finally take a drink. And out of nowhere comes all of my friends, all my teammates, all of my kids from all over Greenwich, right? And they like, you do not touch this guy.
And those were the Catholic kids.
These are
right?
this is, and he doesn't, and I honestly felt like, you know, there's a kinship to the respect that you have for each other. And I felt that in high school. I felt that when I went pro. I had to laugh about it, right? All the linemen go to the bar and have beers. That's the social life. And so here I'm the quarterback. I'm supposed to gather these guys and like, hey, come fight for me, you know, but I can't go to the bar, you know, like, but I can. I'll go. And then the first time I went down at USFL and some old grizzled veterans that come down, they had a big jug of a pitcher of milk. as a joke, kind of like, hey, here's your picture of milk.
Well, and you actually, that was when
But
people
we had a
would
chugging kind,
right.
but that's the spirit of what I'm talking about. It's like we're gonna go hang together. I'm not gonna be we're friends, man. We're gonna have association. So I've been about that, and I pray I've been decent at it. I'm aspirational about trying to find common ground.
And I'm not trying to be too indelicate, but no premarital sex
right,
either,
so that's
right?
how it works.
I mean,
that's how it works.
That has to test the bounds on your tolerance.
I don't know. It's funny. Fidelity for me is it's just I would not want to burden anybody with how I think about it, but fidelity was always something super important to me, and that's I never looked at anything from heaven as a weapon or as a something that, I always felt like an invitation. Like I'm invited to do something maybe good for my body, maybe good for my soul, and that was it. I never used it it wasn't ever a weapon, Graham.
I mean, that leads us to your love life, though, and the next topic. So take me through these letters that you and your bishop would get from people that were convinced
how many hours do you do? What are we doing? This is insanity. The bishops. Oh, we're going to cover all this ground. All right. Well, there's.
We tried to do our homework.
I guess he told me there's all kinds of letters from women and their parents and people that's, had kind of divine insight that we needed to be married to me. And so there's all this insanity going on around my life. Gratefully for me, I lived in a little bubble, and I kind of just made my way without a lot of fanfare. And so I didn't run into it very much. It was never a big part of my life. I felt like I dated very, organically. Like there wasn't as much fanfare as maybe it was happening around me.
What about the NFL ref and the Italian food recommendation?
I thought it was Mexican food, but it was Italian. I think you're right. We were in law school together, and he was the referee, and he said, "Look, you guys should go on a date." And then the story goes that he called roughing against the passer, and then he turned to me and winked and said, "She likes Mexican." I thought maybe it was Italian. I can't remember, but yeah, it actually happened. It was funny.
How about the date with Marie Osmond?
Now, talking about someone who's famous, right? That's when I realized
especially
fame in
then,
Hollywood is. That's when I realized fame in Hollywood is different than fame in athletics. It is way different, and it was fun. We're friends. She's still a great friend through the years. Yeah, we went on a date and went bowling. It was I was a corny dater.
There was a period of your life, though, where it seemed like, from what I read and the folks I talked to close to you, that you'd gotten yourself pretty worked up. That the holidays were tough for you because you just kind of felt like maybe I'm not going to find my person.
Yeah,
right?
No, I mean not only kind of culturally, which is like you get Mormon kids get married and LDS kids get married and have kids, but I didn't want to live alone. Like living alone sucks. And so time went on, and there's a famous quote from Brigham Young. He's a three great-grandfather. He said, "Anyone who's not married by 28 is a menace to society." So I remember when I turned 28, I was like, well, I'm a menace. And
but you laugh about it now. It was like later on you started to get worked up.
You got to understand, Graham. I'm trying to be a great expertise in a job that's super hard. It took every bit of myself to do, and from January to June, there was like a window to kind of have a relationship, try to figure something out, and then you had to go back and just grind it out. And so we did that for 18 years, and so the anxiety about it was, and I'll have Barb, we'll talk to Barb in a minute, but her story, it's really,
And even before we get to her, and couple false starts in there, right?
I really, no. There wasn't. It wasn't without effort. It wasn't without effort.
Jim was telling me, he's like, I had the dubious honor of sitting Steve down at one point and telling him this person might not be.
So we took teamwork, but it wasn't without effort. I was about it, right? I was about let's, and so I don't mind.
Was there a point though where you thought maybe this, because this isn't going to work?
I just I needed to meet somebody that really resonated with me, and I remember the first time I heard Barb's voice on an answer machine, and I remember the first date we stayed and just chatted that date took 10 years to make. My friend, Ty Tanner, he was the one that told me, this is your wife. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he just told me, that I'm telling you. And then he tried to set it up for years. We're both so stubborn. She didn't want to date an athlete. And we finally got together the first date, and then 6 months later we were engaged, and a year later we were married. So it was I don't know, it's not a miracle, but it was a cool story.
Do you remember the conversation you had when you were in Palm Springs and you told your buddy you just called off your blind date in Scottsdale?
Yeah. Do you have time to do this kind of research? I mean, who does this? Who does this for him? Nobody. He does it himself. It's a collective effort. What are you going to Antarctica and you have nothing to do for a month?
Researcher Brian as well.
The holy. So. We finally had it scheduled, tied up, finally got us both together. And I was driving, and I had a blind date in LA, and it was terrible. And I remember one of my good friends who was Eddie DeBartolo's seniors, kind of right-hand man, Jack Lambert, who I'd become very friendly with, who was very supportive of me through the dramas of the 49ers. And he lived in Palm Springs, and I was going to go see him. And so I promised him. So I said, okay, I'm going to drive, I'll see Jack. And I saw him, I stopped in his house, and I told him everything that was going on. He goes, you got to quit trying to put everything in a box. You got to have an idea that it might be someone that just doesn't fit exactly. And you got to have an open mind. You got to and with that conversation, went to Phoenix, had the date, and that was it. So I got to give Jack Lambert credit, rest in peace.
It wasn't a joke when you heard her voicemail.
No, it was I don't know how people are. You don't, I remember Tide was in the car, and I was leaving her a message that I was going to be late for our first date. And her voicemail came on, and it was her voice. And I remember hanging up and go, Tide, I don't know what I did. I just heard a voice that I just feel like familiar. I don't know I don't know how do you put that in context other than just a feeling you had. And then by that night, feeling like, man, I never went home from Phoenix. I drove in a rental car and stayed till training camp and dated her and got engaged.
Children. When you were growing up, your mom was kind of the easier one, your dad was the harder one. To what extent is that similar in the dynamic between you and Barb?
Well, it depends, because Barb's got a lot of grit in her, and she even says that they're both born in February. They're both.
Or is she the harder one, and you're the easier one?
That's what I'm saying. She's got some grit in her, but I do too. So I think it's a yin and yang with she and I, a pretty good yin and yang. The kids would, you do a Graham Bensinger, sit down with each one of the kids if you want to, and we'll get deeper into this. But I think that, we have a good yin and yang thing going. And Barb is self-made. She, many ways raised herself, and nothing against her mom, but she's very independent. She made her own living. She made her own school. She did everything herself.
Summa cum laude.
Yeah.
Put herself
from
through
Arizona State,
college modeling, right?
Yep. And she was serious about it. So I think out of respect for all of that, how we raise kids is really in combination. Nobody has a role, first of all, the amazing things, having a child is mind-bending. It's like part of it's insane. Like, what is happening? Here comes this child that now, and I promised her for what I had seen her go through, a terrible pregnancy, and the pain. I was like, I will do anything. I'll change every diaper. I will change, and she held me to it. I was the greatest diaper changer. Like, you know me, we're gonna get really good at it. I remember we were at a restaurant. We took Braden, our oldest, with us in a car seat everywhere. He was always with us. And we were at a pretty fancy restaurant, and Braden, had, we had to change the diaper, and it was bad. So I go into the men's bathroom. Of course, there's no changing table. So I do the wall sit against the wall, kind of like, and make a thing. I got the bag here, I got Braden here. And I'm telling you, Graham, it was the greatest feat of athleticism as I took Braden up and cleaned everything up, made everything, didn't make a mess. I remember as I finished the diaper, a guy that I didn't notice was kind of staring at me. He goes, "Are you Steve Young?" And I remember this, I'm not making this up. I remember like taking a second going, "Yes, I am." Look what just happened, bro. You couldn't find, and that was like one of my great moments, athletic moments. And I was in a wall sit for like 3 minutes. I was like athletic feat. But yeah, that's part of our raising the kids.
Speaking of athletic moments, daughters in track and field
yes.
for
So
BYU?
My boys, Braden's a music theater major. He's trying to make it on Broadway right now. Jackson's in production and in school for performance. And then, so my boys, love them, but they didn't play football, and which is fine. They didn't play sports really. It was awesome. I had to learn how to parent someone unique. And now we're full circle. My boy's trying to perform, and he comes to the 49er games. He goes, "Dad, you know what? As a performer, it's like the same thing. Like, we're really just performers. I'm just doing it a different way." And I was like, after all these years thinking that we were doing something completely different, we're doing something that's very resonant. And so for all my kids, and my girls are incredible athletes. Summer is a track star, high jump heptathlete in college, and Lila is a dancer and is going to be famous for it. She's really, really good. So the kids are all unique, different, and that's cool.
And one of the benefits of not having the ESPN gig anymore is flag football coaching, right?
So yeah, I had so girls flag football is now in the California State Federation. So high schools can now play it, second year. And the first year, the girls came to me and said, not Steve, they said, "Dad, we're going to go out for a flag football." I'm like, "Cool." They came up from the first practice and said, "Hey, coach asked if you could come help." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I guess I have to. You guys are playing." Graham, I'm telling you, girls football at its root, at what it is a dance step. It's choreography. It's detail. It's all the things that I see women who come out to play flag football are so natural and eat up every inch of what is the rootedness of football and love the game in a way that boys don't love the data. They don't love the detail. They don't, what snap count is it? I can't remember when I just left the huddle. And so I've said from my experience teaching girls from scratch the game of football, and the love that they had for the game by the end of the season was so profound that I want to trademark. Football is a girl or woman or girl's game. It is made for girls. And girls are flourishing at flag football. I've loved being around it. I've loved their joy in it. And I've had more fun coaching the girls in flag football and then on things in a long time.
How do you figure out what the right balance is between all the success you've had creating endless opportunities for your children and avoiding dampening motivation?
I've always said for the kids, the one thing that I want you to be able to have is the ability to do hard things. To be vulnerable enough to recognize when you've screwed up and then go fix it. And I can talk about it, but as another human, you have to live it out. And how do I do that? Because I don't want them to struggle. I don't want them to be at risk. I want them to, but I don't want them to be easy street. Like, I want them to feel at risk and feel the sense of accomplishment and challenge and trouble and how to get out of it and how to fix it. And so, Graham, you've got the art of that, and parenting with a few dollars in your pocket is something I think about a lot. I'm worried that I've failed all the time. Like,
Why?
I just failed at not giving the kids those opportunities. But as my oldest, now 25, is engaged in one of the most difficult things in the world, is to try to get on Broadway at 6'5", and seeing his tenacity and his ethic, I feel like, well, maybe we're okay. Maybe we're okay. But it's unnerving, because as a kid, what you learn most is how to grind it out. And if you steal that from kids,
The struggle.
but then how do you put your kids in a situation where they're struggling when you can fix it? You don't need to struggle. I can fix that. And then your kids can grow up with resenting you because you're like, you let me struggle when you could have fixed it. So it's a dynamic that's super complex. Parenting in general. And people say, well, Steve, so you have a few dollars in your pocket, so this is tough on you. I'm not saying, look, I'm not trying to do anything but just speak my truth about what the challenges of parenting, regardless. But this was a unique one that other people might not have, or not. I don't know how to say.
Where do you net out on it, though, and what that balance is?
I swear to you, Graham, the only thing you can do, you can talk about it. You can talk about the challenges. You can talk about your challenges growing up. I don't know. And then you can just model it. That's really the only power you have. Superpower of parenting is modeling with the very thing that you want your kids to try to understand. And if there's something really important to you, then show them what it looks like. And that's really all you can do. And I hope that I have not stolen from the kids in a way that could really hurt their development because they didn't get the challenge or the at-riskness that I think is super important. Graham, you've just hit on something that I can talk about forever and not really know exactly that I've even touched it in the right way. I've read parenting books. I've asked people questions a lot. How do you do this? But man, parenting is a white knuckle experience.
My wife's due with her first the end of July, and the scary thing about all of that is it seems like you don't even realize till later on in life as to whether or not you succeeded.
Well, no, that's the whole problem. But I think that's why modeling is the superpower, because kids see what they learn what they see, and so I think that's why I've tried to model those things. But I don't know. You hit on something that the greatest joy in my life, the greatest sublime moments of my life have come from parenting my kids and being with my wife. Like, people always say family is everything. And I don't want to say that because everyone's like, yeah. I'm just saying the experiences of my kids coming one by one in your own unique form, and again, my theology, another divine human, and I thought when I finished football, like, what will ever replace it? What, are you kidding me? Like, football, it's just it's a thing to go be an expert at, but it's not parenting, it's not marriage, it's not intimate relationships that are, the ones that'll, when I'm hopefully 95 or 100 years old, that, relationships are what will matter. I mean, that's what I've learned from anyone I've asked that's older,
Thanks for doing this.
Graham, you're the man. I don't know what in the world you're going to do with all that. That is insanity.
What do you mean?
Like, who edits this mess?
A couple of the folks here.
Oh my gosh. How long is the show? 7 hours?